Hello, everyone. It's Richard Lewis here for Rivalry once again, and bringing you another interview with one of the elite Counterstrike players right now. Also, a guy who's in possession of the best hair in all of esports, possibly. I'm trying to catch you up, but got a long way to go. It is, of course, Twistzz, formerly of Team Liquid. How are things, buddy?
Things are going really well.
Yeah.
Just relaxing, waiting for the season to start individually, and looking forward to it.
Did you watch Blast, the finals? Were you watching any of the CS? Because I saw you streaming. I didn't know if you were kind of keeping an eye on things, especially, you've got, I wanted to know what your attitude towards Team Liquid would be like now that you're no longer on the Bucks.
I still watch their matches. I still supported. There's no like hard feelings towards the players. I was like really curious as to how FalleN would play and how the team would play around him and stuff. But it seems like he's had like a tremendous impact, not only on the in-game aspect, but also the environment. So which is good.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I guess we'll start there. We'll start with the big stuff. That's what everyone wants to know, because I think the Team Liquid situation, I know, dude, like it was heartbreaking for me personally, because, when you guys got to the #1 position, end of 2019, I saw sort of it was like the Voltron of North American, players all coming together, making this incredible team. Super exciting to watch, aggressive, loads of kills, exciting plays, everyone a star in their own right. And I thought you guys would dominate for a long, long time. And then sort of seeing it slowly unravel was kind of heartbreaking. I said for months, please don't change the roster, just find a way to make it work. And then in the end, obviously, someone had to go, and that turned out to be you. But let's talk about that. Let's talk about being the #1 team in the world and when things were going good in Team Liquid. How did you get to that point? What was happening that was so special at that moment in time in that team?
I'd say before like our huge Grand Slam run, honestly, I can't recall what triggered us to perform so well, but it was like gradual. I mean, I guess it was us just practicing really well and using what we practiced, and we didn't really change anything. We'd always go by our book, what we went over, what worked for us, and eventually, I think all of us just hit like a ceiling at the same time mechanically, where even if our strats weren't working out, we could just win through aim. And throughout the entire year, I think our team had the best trading stats, which goes a long way. You don't have to have the best strats, but as long as you're trading in the sites, it can go your way anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting point. Like you guys did definitely all hit kind of like, peak form all at once, and it did kind of feel that way, that like even when you weren't having these, like, even when rounds were starting to fall apart, it was like there was always someone that could, like, just get you out of the hole. Then you have that player break. I mean, the narrative that we all tell in pundit land, in journalist land, on by the numbers and all that bullshit. Well, the narrative we always tell is that player break absolutely fucking killed you. That if you hadn't have gone on that break, who knows how long you would have dominated for, because you did seem unbeatable at that time. Can you give us any insight into that? Because and why a player break would have potentially made the team unravel, why things weren't the same when you guys came back?
I think it was everyone really like, we're like all up here in terms of like adrenaline, and we're like pumped to always play. And I think we're all in that zone where we're used to being like on a stage every weekend fighting for a trophy, and then suddenly we realize we're on break. It's not gonna like be that way for now. And I mean, then it comes down to individual things, and it's like however your break goes like individually. And I'm not sure like what my teammates did, but obviously we all took a break from CS. Mine was more unfortunate because I had to move, and I was without internet for a couple weeks. So playing for me was not happening.
Right.
And yeah, when we came back and we went to boot camp in Malta before Berlin, the team just like, things felt really, really different. Like we pretty much lost like almost all of our scrims. Like we couldn't. Our practice was horrible. And then we just thought it was kind of like a fluke or whatever, or we're just gonna try running our strats into the major. And things actually did start off like pretty good. Like we went through our group stage like flawlessly, and then unfortunately had to play Astralis instantly in the quarterfinals.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so what was the mood like? I mean, because I find it always fascinating, the kind of interconnectivity of teams. And, look, I won't tell you any lies. We've heard lots of things externally about, Team Liquid having big personalities, potentially difficult people to work with. And it kind of looked like, after the break, when you guys came back and went into that major, and I'm saying the end of the year, it was September, but you guys didn't seem to be as upbeat, and it was and you guys didn't seem to be playing with that same sort of confidence, smiles on your faces whenever the camera was there, and that was something that I thought you could visibly see get progressively worse until obviously, your recent roster move. So what was going on internally? I mean, was everyone still in a good place in terms of interpersonal relationships?
Specifically at the major, yeah, everything was fine. I mean, it's hard for things to change like that so fast, like player relationships to fall apart after one player break. So obviously the thing that sucked for us the most was, there's only 2 majors a year, and we were looking forward to being in our prime to take a major trophy home again for NA. And obviously that didn't happen. But I think after that, it was just like when things really fell downhill. I mean, I think we still put up like a decent performance at like New York, but compared to what we were doing before, we were winning trophies before. So getting like a 3rd or 4th place doesn't like work for us. And then eventually, as like the events progressed towards the end of the year, things just really like fell apart. I think Malmo was one of our worst, and then we ended up like hitting the final and like ECS. That was like kind of where we felt like like we can get back into things. But the entire rest of the year was like shaky, and that really I think affected us going into 2020. And then honestly, like the nail in the coffin was that there was no more like online events. And yeah, our team like didn't boot camp through 2020 in North America, and I honestly think that could have been like the change for us. If we boot camped and got our heads in the right place, maybe that like Grand Slam roster would still exist.
Yeah, I mean, that's the crazy thing, like very hard to kind of judge 2020. I just did a video talking about this actually, where it's like, because of the situation, because people were like regionalized off, because people, as you say, weren't boot camping, team houses were now deemed to be potential health risks, and what seemed to be optimal was players playing from their individual homes and kind of adhering to lockdown protocols. I think we ended up with this like very weird, just year of results where some teams just stayed stagnant, didn't improve, some got visibly worse. And honestly, with all the other bullshit that was going on in the scene with like, coaches getting up to shenanigans and everything else, it's like, what do we really know about 2020 by the end of it? I mean, how can you potentially judge who was a good team, who wasn't? The results are all they all come with a caveat. Why did you guys, was it just the COVID protocols why you guys decided not to boot camp? Did anyone suggest it?
I think it was really difficult for Naf and I to go to the US and then also be able to go back to Canada. I think that there was an issue there. And I don't think there was a way for us to actually find time to boot camp, because the Los Angeles office was, I think, limited to only so many people due to COVID precautions. And I think most of us thought it was unsafe to actually travel, considering how bad like America was at the time.
Certainly was. I got out of there just before it went crazy, but I was shitting my pants. I had to fly out from Texas just when they had their big crazy spike, and then I was flying into London, which we were being told on the news was like in America, like it was like 28 days later. I didn't even know what I was gonna, arrive to, and in the end, I managed to get through with it unscathed, and then just been in lockdown ever since. But so you did allude to something there. You said relationships didn't break down that quickly, but that sort of came later in 2020. Now, listen, I know obviously no one wants to like talk out of school, name names, anything like that. So that's fine. I'm not going to pressure you. I'm not that kind of asshole. But I am going to ask you, what that kind of means. Like, were people not talking to each other? Were people doing things differently in game, what they were meant to be doing? Were people like arguing and infighting over roles? How did those problems manifest?
I think they manifested through from for multiple reasons actually, and they just like built up. I think one of them would have been in July, the player break, where changes were happening, but behind like players' backs, and that's always like a bad thing, I think, especially when you're under the impression that you're just gonna get a player break. You're gonna be able to come back like stronger. You're actually gonna be able to relax after like a tough like couple months of online CS, and then hopefully improve as a team. But no, that didn't happen. And when you're told that you're like potentially like cut, even though you told them how important the break was to refresh mentally, it's pretty lame. I think before that, it was just like, I mean, my individual performance like decreased for numerous amounts of reasons. Sadly, I think a lot of personal life stuff affect me.
Okay.
And it stems from like family issues or whatever. So I had like a very shaky year. But in terms of like the team stuff, I think certain players like lost trust in other players, and that like mutual respect like was no longer there. And the team can't. There's like no cohesiveness when people like can't respect each other. Like things kind of just fall apart, and I'm one to like kind of take things like a little bit too personal. So if I know my teammate that we won the Grand Slam with like no longer likes me in some way, I kind of like lose confidence.
Yeah, I mean, it was a real sad thing to see. I thought something was up because first of all, I still think you're a phenomenal player. I mean, the reason why I was talking about you being cut was it just didn't feel like there was any room to make this work anymore. It felt like if you had a good game, someone else had a bad game. It was like there was this weird overlap where you seem to be occupying space with other players, and it just kind of felt that for the reasons you said. You had some inconsistencies. But round about that time, I also heard rumors that Liquid was shopping you out to other orgs. I'd had a number of people say, "Oh, have you heard? They're offering Twistzz to this team, to that team." Maybe, and I kind of felt, yeah, that's definitely not a good sign. I mean, that means someone somewhere has already made the decision that when the change does happen, it's going to be you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that happened actually because of what I did individually. Back in October, I took like a 12-day like mental break. I'm pretty sure it was like reported. And in that time in October, FalleN was actually practicing with the team as like a stand-in. Honestly, in those 12 days, I was in the middle of like renegotiating a contract and seeing, how the future would go. And I was like contemplating, and it was a big time. I had to make big decisions. There's multiple options or career paths that I could go down in like esports, and I really had to like think it through. But I put it this way to like the org, and I said if the bootcamp doesn't go well and it's already like turning out to be like a negative thing for the team, then I'm not going to resign. And I'm pretty sure they just took it upon themselves because they knew the bootcamp wasn't going well, and that they knew I would most likely leave, which is true. Like the bootcamp was miserable, and it was I definitely had to get out, and I think it's better for the team too.
Yeah. Do you sort of think that, is there any responsibility in your mind that can be laid on you? Because you've said, you're an emotional guy. Sometimes you do take things personally, which, by the way, I think in a team, it's perfectly acceptable if, to take things personally. It's such a huge part of your life if you're a competitor. But do you think maybe looking back, I could have done some things differently behaviorally that may have extended the team's lifespan?
Yeah, I honestly think that even when I was still like playing like semi well and like in March and like the June area, I actually still wanted to bench myself around that time. due to the fact that I was not able to focus on like CS like the way I would like to. And even back then, I thought it would be healthier if I was just like a 6-man and I was just like vibing, you know. But that was never an option. You know, luckily the org would always like try to say, you know, you're still good and stuff, and you give me confidence. But honestly, I feel like it probably would have been better if I just sat out for majority of the year. But
well, you said, look, and again, I don't want you to open up with anything too personal, but you said you had some family problems. I also remember you having some health problems as well, right? I mean, you know, it was you've had a very topsy-turvy time, both personally and physically. Is that accurate?
yeah, I mean, it was kind of like a trade-off. I ended up going vegan shortly after Katowice, and I haven't had stomach issues since, so it was kind of a trade-off. I traded no more stomach issues for family issues, apparently.
Oh, it might be like a dairy type thing. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, I mean, dude, I got a friend who's like vegan, not one of those annoying militant vegans, just a normal, regular vegan, and you know, he's older than me, and it's like he just looks young. He's so youthful and energetic. You know? No joke. I've been thinking about doing it myself, but I just like steak too much, I guess. So, but yeah, well, I'm glad you're over the hump with that. Let's talk about the breaking point, because that I've heard about that happening so much to so many players, where, you know, you take a break and then you see them playing with someone else, and it's like kind of like, you know, it's like watching your girlfriend go for dinner with their personal trainer, right? Like, you know, it's sticking over in your mind. So when you saw them playing with FalleN, I mean, I'm guessing at that point, you know, the writing's on the wall, right?
I was actually okay with it. I think they had other players that played with them too, so I wasn't against the fact, you know, like if we ended up becoming like a 6-man roster and I was the one to be rotated out, then I understood that, because I was very on and off throughout the year in terms of wanting to play or not for the team. But I think the part that affected me the most would have been July, because it's like so, like especially during like the first like portion of the year where, you know, things weren't going so well. I mean, we still had like decent LAN results, and you know, who knows what the scene would have been like if the events still continued. But for changes to be made without players fully being aware of it during a player break is always like something that kind of ruffles the feathers of. I mean, I feel like it should affect any player, to be honest, knowing that, you know, people weren't communicating with you.
What about Jason's impact then? Because, you know, I told Jason when he took the job, that's Moses for people that only know gamer names. But I told him when he took the job, I said, brother, you're fucking crazy. You're going from a job where you will be hired for every event because you're so good at what you do. You're also such a nice guy. Like, no one in the scene hates Moses. Like, there are even people who hate like Anders, you know, like no one hates Moses because he's just such an agreeable guy and doesn't have any like mad controversial opinions. He leaves that behind to basically go to a team that's been struggling, that everyone thinks can be the world's best. And if he'd got you guys back to winning tournaments, I don't think you would have got any credit. I think people would have gone, yeah, they should be winning tournaments. Look at that fucking roster. So, one of the things I always suspected he was doing was kind of like being the mature guy in the room that could maybe deal with like conflict resolution, smoothing over that thing, like being a casting vote when it came to like tactical ideas. So did he have that kind of impact on the team?
Yeah, I mean, I think he actually ended up helping me a lot individually. He almost had instant impact on our team environment when he first joined. You know, he wasn't that impactful when it came to like inner game like strategies, because obviously when you're casting and stuff, you don't catch like every single detail, but you're just trying to tell a storyline. And I think he still tried his best with everything, but there was definitely a big difference when he joined. I noticed that he was like watching and he was just observing the team for like the first like 2 weeks, just so he could like create a game plan for us and, you know, how to target the situations or see the issues. And I mean, he immediately helped me stop getting scapegoated, because often there'd be like mistakes that would happen particularly, and it couldn't even be like my fault. You know, someone else could have did something, but somehow it would trace back to it being my fault. And
Right.
Jason helped that get fixed pretty fast, and I was very thankful for that. And then one of his plans was to help me get utilized more in terms of game. And even though none of my positions like got changed, and sometimes I wanted them to get changed and they didn't, he still helped me like build confidence up to go like take duels like in my areas where before I would think it's like risky because if I die, it could be seen as like a mistake. And yeah.
Being a player like yourself, star player, how do you feel when you're coming off, you've had a bad game, and like it's like you say, what people don't really understand with Counterstrike is like numbers. They tell like a fraction of the story. There's so many little little bits of context and nuance. For example, like if a guy can't hold their position and you're constantly getting wrapped on, yeah, it's gonna fuck your score over as well, because all of a sudden you're holding like multiple spaces that you shouldn't be doing, right? Someone else should be doing their job, and now it's negatively affecting you. I see a lot of players get really hung up on stats. I've seen that a lot down the years. Even like if you remember in that good Virtus Pro team, I remember Pasha saying, there's people in this team that play for stats. Can you believe it? Championship winning team.
Jesus, I didn't know that.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about that. Like, does it get in your head because you're a player with a huge reputation, huge levels of expectations put on you because of your talent, and then sometimes you've had some unbelievably poor score lines?
Honestly, I don't think statistics affect me that much. The only one I'd really look at is like the KST one, where it shows like the overall impact, and I think that one is like one of the most important ones. Same with like utility damage. So, I mean, it's hard like in a game for you to have like a ton of impact, especially on like a map like Inferno, where if like every team like uses B so much, and if you're just rotating a lot, sometimes the game just goes like that, where you can't get into like the proper groove of things, because sometimes you can't even hold your own site because you have to leave it. And honestly, I've never really been one to look at stats that much. I remember when I got my first like MVP and we lost the event, it was still one of the most miserable things ever, because that should have been our first like trophy lift, and the MVP was like so meaningless to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, stats aren't really important. I mean, I honestly like played like pretty good in most of the scrims, and I think it was because we played different in practice. People would be like more like outgoing and take like duels or take opportunities that we wouldn't take in matches. And I think our whole I think we just hit the right timings in practice, and we wouldn't really hit them in matches.
Yeah, I mean that's why, again, one of the things you always hear when you're coming into tournaments, like if you're an analyst or whatever, is like, oh, they've been winning all their scrims. Like, if the team that was winning all their scrims before a tournament went on to win, it's never happened. Never, not once. It's absolute bullshit. It's meaningless because you have that fearlessness when things aren't on the line. It's who can replicate that in a big tournament setting, who'll still take those risks, and not many pros will do it, right? Because the stakes are so high. So yeah, you leave. Was it like a super uncertain future, like to take that leap? Because based on your timeline, it looks like it's October where it's all been essentially decided. When you come on the market, it's not even just CS that it is a potential move for you now. There's Valorant as well. I'm sure everyone's clamoring to get you on a team because you've got a huge personal brand. It's not just about your talent. So did you think like, I'm going to be fine, there's a bunch of safety nets for me to land into? Or was it still a bit nerve-wracking and kind of like take the final decision and plunge into the unknown?
It was like a mixture of feelings. I think it was more emotional than nerve-wracking. It's because I was really attached to like the org. Like Liquid's an amazing org, and it actually hurt to leave them because they do so much for their players, and I just like the whole brand style. They have a lot going for them and a lot of great people inside the org. So I think that was the only thing that really made it hard to pull the trigger and get out of there and ask to be put up for sale. But yeah, there was multiple career paths, or at least the Valorant was there. But to be honest, that was my last option. I would have done a lot to avoid Valorant.
Yeah. Well, it would have been a massive waste. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Because like I'm right. So I know a few things. Obviously, like I've been around a lot of esports, and the first year or two of an esport, the people who are at the top are almost like completely forgotten and irrelevant after that 2 year point. It's like, you know, all the good kids that are like second generation come into the space, kids you've never heard of, they take over. All the washed up boomers that were at the top that were just cruising by on experience, they all get replaced, you know. And I've seen it happen a bunch of times in various iterations of Counterstrike and everything else. So I think it would be a massive waste if you went to Valorant. But equally, I think the game's going to be big. I think it's the first realistic threat we've had the kind of Counter-Strike's dominance in FPS esports. So, I mean, you say it was your last choice, but I mean, do you think like, you know, if you went over there, you would crush it and potentially be in a scene that could be as big, if not bigger than Counter-Strike?
Yeah, I do think if I went over there, I would crush it for multiple reasons. But you know, there was only like one option, and I would be into try to rejoin and play with like Nick again or Nitro.
Right.
But yeah, I just like wasn't ready to switch games. You know, when I play it on the side, like for a little bit, it's like fun and stuff. But there's a lot of irritating things in the game, and yeah, I just don't see it as like a fun like 24/7 thing for me.
I'm glad you brought that up. Actually, I should have. The way I structured the interview, I should have done that a bit earlier. But I mean, obviously, like I always had heard that you and like Nitro had like a really good relationship. So when he left to go to Valorant, and there was that big change at Team Liquid, I mean, I'm guessing that had like a pretty profound impact on how you were feeling about the team, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just super unfortunate because Nitro was already unhappy in the team, and he was like losing some motivation. You know, inner team conflict or turmoil was really breaking down how players like treat each other, and yeah, to know that he like wasn't gonna be there after the player break really affected things. That was the biggest, I think, roster change that's like ever affected me individually, because he was the only person I was like super comfortable like talking to. You know, like we shared like a similar like sense of humor. We're the only ones that would play like games like outside of like CS, and at events or boot camps, I would always like hang out with him. So it's for me, it was kind of just I knew it would be a big change for me, and things would feel weird and like returning to like a boot camp or just normal team stuff. To be honest.
Yeah, he seems like a super chill guy. You know, when I've been like talking to him and hanging out, and I thought when he moved into the IGL role, I was like, you know what, it might not be something tactically he's going to excel at, but I think he's a super like level-headed and mature guy, and sometimes that's all you need, in the heat of the moment. I'm guessing when Stewie took over, was there like a contrasting IGL style there? Was it very different?
I think it was a bit different. I think the main thing would be that they had like disagreements. You know, one person would think like that person's idea wasn't that good, and vice versa. And of course, it would create like conflict. But yeah, I mean that's the far as it goes. You know, there's like a lot of conflict in how like the team should be playing and stuff. And Nick wasn't always like playing his. Nick was definitely playing like worse than 2019 for sure.
Yeah.
And he was like opping a bit less, and yeah, I think he was kind of just he realized that there needed to be like a change, and that's what he did.
But back to Valorant for just a moment. I mean, what are your thoughts overall about how the scene is shaping up? And there's a lot of you're going to get this with like fan bases. There's a lot of conflict between like, oh, Valorant's going to be amazing. It's going to be huge. Fuck Counter-Strike. And obviously all the Counter-Strike guys like, lol, we've been around for 20 years. Like, no one's ever taken us down. So, I mean, what do you think? I as I said, I legitimately think it's the first realistic challenge. And with all of North America seeming to be making the choice to go with Valorant over CS, I think for the first time in the game's lifespan. I think we've maybe got some real problems on the horizon.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's mainly the fact that orgs didn't dedicate enough to the CS, I guess, to keep people, I guess, keep people, I can't think of the words, to give like an incentive, you know, for people to stay in Counterstrike and play. And the orgs probably just saw it as like a safer investment for Valorant. And here we are, we lost half of our North American scene. But yeah, I think the game's gonna have a ton of success. But I do still believe Counter-Strike will rule Europe. I think there's a lot of CS fans that are European, and the numbers speak for themselves on the recent matches. You know, we're hitting like personal records still, and it's only online CS. So the game's still thriving in some ways. And I think the strongest part of like Valorant is that it has the Asian regions like involved.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a big boost for the overall player scene.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch it with some interest. I'll probably jump across and do some content there, but you know, Counter-Strike's always gonna be the number one for me. Do you have any thoughts in general about, you know, the kind of people we're seeing moving across the Valorant? You know, I've used the phrase washed up boomers. I'm poking fun. I'm obviously good friends with some of these guys because I'm a washed up boomer too. But do you have any thoughts about kind of like, you know, the type of talent that's over there right now, and the sort of jokes about it being the CSGO retirement home?
I honestly think it was a great choice for most of the players that went. You know, I think it's really unfortunate that Nitro didn't receive bigger offers. I think he could have made a team like EG a lot better, even if his stats weren't that good.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's just unlucky that we lost him to Valorant. But players like Steal and stuff, I think it was the best decision for them to move to a different game to lead and grow where they're not banned. I think it's perfect for them. Yeah, I mean, I have no negative opinion about Valorant. I think the game's like pretty well made, and you know, it's compared to like CS a lot, but honestly, when I play it, it doesn't feel like CS. You have to treat the game different.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. I mean, I did like one of the, you know, early reviews when it came out, and you know, even though that you could see they had tried to put as much of the Counter-Strike DNA in it as possible, so if you were a CS player, you could pick up and play, you know, instantly. And even someone as like old and, you know, washed up as me, like, you know, I was finding the game very, very easy when people who hadn't played Counter-Strike were maybe still struggling with it. But what I thought was interesting was, you know, like you could see a lot of the Counter-Strike players, you know, really struggling with like the abilities and stuff like that. You know, it was like a mind-blowing concept to them. So yeah, it is a very different game. And I think that's why I think the first gen, second gen, you know, these old guys that have come from CS, I don't think they'll be at the top in a few years. I think some kid's gonna come along and do, you know, that have been raised on Fortnite maybe, and they're just gonna just do some
a cracked aim.
Yeah, you and like nothing you've ever seen before. You know?
I mean, it's definitely different because you have all these like players from different scenes like converge onto one esport title, and it's, you know, that didn't happen before. You know, like an Overwatch player like couldn't pick up CS, like they're gonna be trash.
Yep.
And where they can go into Valorant, you know, they're playing alongside like, you know, CS players or Fortnite players, and they're still competing for like the #1 spot. So I think it says some things about the learning curve of Valorant, and says some things about like the skills that you can transfer from different games.
So we get back to you, career. Let's talk first of all about streaming. You seem to be a pretty savvy kid. You know, I've always thought you've got a smartness to you that not a lot of players have. So let's talk about streaming. I noticed you've been streaming a bit the last few days. You've had very, very good numbers. I think it's a real shame that we don't have more top-level Counter-Strike streamers with big followings. I think it's a space that we need to fill. I mean, I understand why we don't, because a lot of the time the players are practicing, and you know, when you practice, the last thing you want to do is then turn on a stream and put all the energy into that. But I also think it's sad that whenever I look at like all the other games, all the other shooters, they've got streamers that attract like, you know, 20,000, 30,000, sometimes more. It was streaming ever something you thought, you know what, I could just pack this all in. I don't need to be a pro. I've got the looks, I got the talent, I got the following. Fuck it, I can just be a streamer.
I mean, it was like a small thought I had where if I was already big like Shroud was, like pulling in like 20K like viewers just playing like CS, then maybe it would be like a viable option. But it's hard for like a top level CS player who's not hitting like 10K consistently in viewers to do something else. And when you're like a streamer, you probably want to be like a variety streamer, and in that case, you have to have already like a huge following to bring in numbers for any game that you play. And if I was a full-time streamer, I wouldn't only want to play CS. I want to, expand my horizon and try different things and experience new games and kind of just relax on stream. But no, I definitely much love like competing still. I wouldn't want to like leave it. I love like practice, the team like atmosphere, and streaming isn't as like easygoing as it seems. Sometimes it can be like really exhausting. There's some times where it's like, fuck man, did I really just turn on the stream? Like now I have to commit. and it's like, I don't want that to be like my life. So as for some people, like I'd say like in Valorant right now, like pro players that are hitting like big stream numbers could probably just step back, as you see with like Tens. He could just step back. He's making a ton of money from content creation and stuff, and it's probably something he enjoys. Now he doesn't have to play competitively anymore, and it's good for him. But for me, I definitely want to compete.
Yeah, so that brings us to the next big question. I mean, there's been a lot of speculation about where you might go. I suspect I know, but obviously I won't put you on the spot and get you to talk out of turn. One thing I was curious about, we actually talked about it on By the Numbers, and I didn't know about this. I was saying, oh, well, like he used to play with Automatic in TSM. Automatic's out there making a team, maybe they reconnect. But then someone told me, oh no, they had like a falling out or something way back then, which seems a bit, I usually I hear all the gossip, and that one just seemed to pass me by. So I thought, while I've got you here, I'll ask, and I don't want to dredge up old wounds or whatever, but that team, that TSM team, you two were the guys that sort of came out and actually went on to have a real career out of it. Some the other guys never sort of matured or bloomed. So was there any truth that you two guys didn't get along? And if so, has that beef been squashed as we've all grown up?
I think there was some small conflict, but I think it just comes down to the inexperience that both of us had. We didn't really know how to like act as a team or treat like teammates. So it's kind of just, I think at the time, like there's arguments about like not being like the star player or whatever. And, we're just both inexperienced players. And I think maybe some turmoil was created, but that ended like pretty fast. And obviously both of us had like successful paths in CS. And yeah, we still talk like sometimes and play games. Like I think when I play like plugs with like Stewie or whatever, I would also play with like Automatic. So there's no hate.
There was also a lot of rumors flying around that Cloud9 might have been an option. So I want to ask you about that. I mean, obviously Henry was building a team. He wanted it to be a Colossus. Not many people get to make the leap. Team Liquid to Cloud9, notorious regional rivals. Was that, without saying too much, was that ever a possibility?
I think a player like reached out to me briefly, asking about it, but no, I don't think it was ever like a viable option for me. And especially seeing like what happens to the team now, they seem like pretty unstable. And to me, it looks like they don't know what direction they want to go in. If their coach like steps away and then they lose their opper, who was like a top 20 player like in 2019, so that's a big hit for them. And yeah, I think without like being talks or anything, I think that would have been a really bad choice for my career.
Yeah, and then obviously the big one everyone's talking about right now, and again, apologies if this is putting you on the spot, is FaZe, which I think is a marriage made in heaven. In fact, when you went into essentially being available, I think somebody, I can't remember the name of who it was, might have been Pie Thrower, made a meme of you in a FaZe jersey. I'm sure you saw it. and that kind of went viral, and people were tweeting that out. It looked great, by the way, and you know, I was thinking like, yeah, you know what, that is a marriage made in heaven. You know, a big brand. They're about kind of like that kind of swag. They've always been, you know, about like we pick up star players, big names. And they've come under fire quite a lot recently for maybe lacking that ambition. You know, they're kind of just plodding along right now. They've also obviously been linked with Karrigan a lot. So, I mean, without committing one way or the other, is theoretically, would a move to FaZe be something you'd be interested in?
Yeah, I think a move to FaZe is definitely, I think, a good move for me. You know, there's a lot of international like team options, and I didn't necessarily like, have my pick. You know, I can just like go anywhere. But there was like I could have had talks with most of the orgs that had international teams.
I think it's safe to say you could have your pick. I think that's true. I mean, there can't be many better players available right now. I mean, I say this all the time. You can afford to have like a one bad ending to your time in a team. Like,
yeah,
no one's thinking you're that guy at the end. They're thinking you're that guy at the beginning still. Now, if you go to whichever team you end up on now, if you fuck up and it doesn't work out, all of a sudden, then it gets a little bit harder to get that move.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I think like picking you up now is a fucking no-brainer. There's so many teams that I think would benefit from you, and there's been, like I say, so much. All the fans of all of these teams are super excited at that prospect. Everyone, I think, is really pulling for you to end up on their team.
Yeah, it's a super positive feeling, good like reinsurance, you know, because like sometimes, I mean, obviously I didn't like think of it, but sometimes I would see comments and I would like think like, fuck, am I really like actually playing that bad? You know, is like something like going on where I feel like in game I'm just like doing my role and like to the best of my abilities at the time. But yeah, I think to go back to the FaZe thing, I think it would be a very good move for me. You know, I mean, the reports are out there. There's definitely some truth to the talks happening, but nothing has been like, you know, nothing set in stone. But yeah.
Well, I mean, like I said, it's a move that I definitely want to see one way or the other. I mean, I've already said this in other content I've made. If that team does come together and Karrigan's there and you're there, I think that team can potentially win trophies in 2021, especially with like everyone right now in the scene. It feels like the scene's going to be more competitive, not because the skill ceiling's gone up, but because you've got the top 3 players in the world are spread out across 3 separate teams. They're wildly inconsistent in their results. I think like this year, we'll probably see multiple teams win trophies rather than one team winning them all. And if that FaZe roster gets put together, I mean, who's to say, right? Karrigan's a Hall of Fame in-game leader for me. If he can't get you to the promised land, probably no one can, right?
Yeah, I mean, 2021 will be pretty weird. I think we'll see numerous amounts of teams hit the #1 spot, probably not hold it for like longer than a couple weeks, and then, you know, the next one's in, and that just comes with the inconsistency and how random online play is. Because it seems like in online CS, like even if something's like obvious, like who the fuck knows if you can like hold the site even if you have 3 there, you know? Like sometimes it just doesn't go your way, and that's how like online CS is right now.
So without putting too fine a point on it, obviously there's like a run of tournaments coming. We're back into, you know, that kind of season. We've already had the Blast Premier. You know, their spring groups is coming up in early February. We're going into the summit. Then we got Katowice partway through February as well. So there's like big tournaments. The Pro League should be starting in March. What time limit have you set yourself on landing on a team? When do you expect to be back in action?
I should be playing for a team, at least in Katowice, for sure.
Okay.
That's like when I'm back.
Right.
Could be earlier, could be later, but that's what I'm hoping for.
What are you going to be doing in the interim? I mean, because, you know, Is it just a little nice, relaxing holiday, or are you getting match fit? You know, lots of practice and training and stuff going on behind the scenes.
Honestly, like not practicing on a team has been super irritating.
Right.
Because like my only form of like individual practice is like FPL, you know, and I'm like playing like 2-3 games a night, and it's like still like good for me. It's like fun, but well, I'm watching matches, and yeah, I'm a little annoyed that I'm not practicing right now.
Well, I'm sure you're gonna get back into it pretty quick. One thing I did want to just ask you about, and we'll start winding the interview down now. We're coming up to our time. A couple of things. I felt you leaving Team Liquid kind of had a very emotional air to it, which you already said. You know, it was like a big decision. It hurt. And when I saw that interview, I can't think of a time I've ever seen it before where a player has gone onto a broadcast, done an interview, and said, "That was my last game. I'm leaving." Was that pre-planned, or was that something that like just came out, or you know, because of the moment, because it was emotional? You know, did you know? Like, did everybody know that you were going to say that going in?
People knew after the match, and that's kind of where I decided that, you know, people should hear it from me and not hear it from a report that goes out. And yeah, it was kind of like a thought process I had. I didn't know if it'd be possible or not until I pushed for it after the match. But yeah, I thought it'd be better for my fans and the Team Liquid fan base to hear it from my voice instead of reading it and not knowing if it's true or not.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was a very emotional moment that got a very emotional response from a lot of your fans. I mean, I was getting chewed up because I'd done a video saying, listen, they're probably going to have to cut Twistzz to make things work. And everyone was like, cut Twistzz? You fucking mad. Fuck you. Drop Stewie, drop Nash, drop everyone else. Not my Twistzz. You know, all the Twistzz fans were there. And then when it happened, I got loads of messages. Nice, you made Twistzz leave. You've made Twistzz cry. You know, people were like,
"Oh, Jesus Christ!"
People thought like I was like the puppet master on the move. But I think, you know, all joking aside, one thing I did see in a lot of the messages and a lot of the hate and vitriol that was coming my way, which by the way I think is hilarious. I'm used to it. I'm a big boy. Was they were all saying like Twistzz will always be Liquid. He'll always be Liquid. Like there were so many Liquid fans that like, even though they're coming to terms with you leaving, I don't think they're ever going to turn on you because, you know, they don't, you know, this isn't a Stanislaw type situation, right? This is something else. And I don't know, it's sort of probably as cliched a question as it is there any kind of like message you would like to send out to those fans?
I mean, for me, it's still surreal to see like how positive the response was. I didn't know what to expect, and to know that there's still so many Liquid fans that would love to see me succeed on another team, and you know, that would still hope for me to wear a Team Liquid jersey one day. I feel like I must have did like pretty good on my time on Liquid in terms of, you know, keeping things like good and drawing like a good fan base. I never try to be like toxic on my social media or whatever. It's always, I'm trying to give like good vibes, and I feel like seeing how positive the response was to me leaving is like a, you know, side effect of overall being like a good like person. So yeah, it's still surprising to me. I don't think I've ever seen such a positive response from an announcement like that.
Yeah, it's unique, but I think you know, it's kind of a testimony to everything that you achieved and just how many people were really pulling, you know, for that Team Liquid roster to kind of bounce back and do another Grand Slam or have another, you know, incredible run of wins. I mean, hell, I think you guys gave it longer than most lineups do and tried almost everything. But I'm hoping that Liquid is better with FalleN. They can make it work, and wherever you end up, I think you're going to be reinvigorated, and you're probably going to be a player that's going to win trophies in the future. So I think everybody wins. You know, not every roster move has to be like a contentious, argumentative nightmare. You know,
yeah, exactly.
Some things just don't work out sometimes, right?
Yeah, it's important for people to know that I did have the decision to like stay, you know, like if I wanted to be on the Liquid lineup, I would be there right now. So it was my choice to step away from that and start on something new.
Well, look, we're at the end. I have loved catching up with you. I think people always assume that, you know, I don't get along with pros because obviously part of my job is to criticize them. But, you know, I followed your career since you broke out in CS, and you're a player I got a lot of respect for, even if I occasionally have to say, but, you know, not so nice things about the way you're playing. And I really want you to do well. I think you've matured a lot. I think you're a fantastic talent. And I think you're a great kind of ambassador and figurehead, if you like, for our scene overall. So, you know, whatever move comes your way, brother, I hope you kill it. I hope you crush it. I really do.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
No worries. Anyway, there you go. That is the great Twistzz. I'm sure we're going to be finding out where he's going to be ending up very, very soon. We're looking forward to seeing him back in action wherever it might be. And make sure, if you like interviews like this one, you stick whatever the kids do on YouTube, you follow, you smash that like button, smash that subscribe button, stick a thumbs up, stick a comment down below, and I'll see you on the next interview. Until then, take care.